Good morning, ladies. Thank you for coming back again. Our topic this morning is fostering fellowship, and I would invite you to follow along in the handout in your books, as well as maybe have a pen and your Bible handy. So I'd like to start by telling you a couple of stories from my life about fellowship. Recently, I was at church, and an 80-some-year-old lady and I were chatting, and she said, recently there's these two little girls from church, I think maybe 8 and 11, who every week they write her a letter and stick it in her church mailbox on Sunday, and then she writes a response and puts it in their church mailbox the next Sunday. So they're exchanging notes. An 8 and an 11-year-old with an 80-some-year-old. Also, I am familiar with a single woman who once a month she'll talk with an older lady from her church, maybe for a half an hour, and they'll talk about life, about struggles or joys or things going on or things she wants to be accountable about, and they have a time of fellowship. Or I'm familiar with a couple of ladies who are both singles, and they regularly go walking together. Maybe call it a walk and talk, where they process life and see the sights along the way. So in all of those stories, those are examples of fellowship. We are all in dozens of relationships with opportunity to have fellowship. So I would invite you all to maybe think a little bit about, from the Bible, what examples of friendship come to mind. What are some examples of friendship from the Bible? And feel free to call it out.
Jonathan and David.
Jonathan and David. Mm-hmm.
Ruth and Naomi.
Ruth and Naomi. Mary and Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. Jesus and John. Mm-hmm. Yes, Mary, Martha, and Jesus. Maybe that was one of the first singles gatherings. Yes, I think you get the picture. The scriptures are full of examples of relationships and people having fellowship. So this morning, I am not planning to say everything there is to say about relationships. And I come to you as a learner. I found in my studies over the last months and weeks that I don't know all that much about relationships or how complex they can be. And I feel like I have a lot to learn with you. So this morning I would like to look at God's Word and think about general principles that we can apply as we relate to people who are in our lives. I'm hoping that this is not so much theory, but practical ideas about how to grow fellowship. So in your books, I have 3 main points that I'd like to talk about. Number 1, the why of fellowship. Number 2, the how of fellowship. And number 3, barriers of fellowship. So first of all, the why of fellowship. This is God's design. Genesis 2:18 says, "It is not good that man should be alone." And then he says, "I will make him a helper comparable to him." So know that marriage is not the sole answer to "it is not good that man should be alone." It also applies to the greater community, the entirety of human life. Family, friends, church, society. Relationships fill a human need created by God. Within each of us is a deep longing to know and be known. This is God's design. Number 2, 2 are better than 1. And I will invite you to Ecclesiastes 4 for this one. Ecclesiastes 4, starting in verse 9. It says, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor, which means they can accomplish more together than 1 individually. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up. So we see that 2 provide help and support and accountability for each other. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? So I hear in that comfort. There is comfort in having more than 1. And though one may be overpowered by another, 2 can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. I hear in that strength and safety in togetherness. I'm sure that y'all know of little people who are afraid of the dark, and how it just helps to have somebody with them when they're going downstairs or outside at night. I think it's kind of that idea, 2 are better than 1. And number 3, God designed believers to be part of something bigger than us. Which equals the church. In 1 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about how our physical bodies are made up of many individual parts, but they're part of a greater whole. And God designed believers to be part of the local church, where we're part of something bigger, where we can find fellowship, where we can give and receive, where we can bless and be blessed, and we can use our gifts to grow. So, with whom do we relate? I put a list in your handout of people that I thought of that we relate with all of the time. Jesus said in the story of the Good Samaritan, where this rich young lawyer came to him and said, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus was trying to get him to think, like, who's around you that you need to be loving? So think for a minute, who are some of your neighbors that God is asking you to love? It might be your family, your church, your coworkers. So there are different levels of relationships. In your handout, there is a diagram of one way to think about this. There are many different levels of relationships. Not all relationships are equal, and it's not appropriate to expect the same level of depth and sharing or connection with everybody. We do well to accept what people can give and not expect that all relationships are same. So the things that I plan to say after this are general ideas for fostering fellowship. They are not intended to specifically relate to family or church or neighbors. They're in general to relate to your neighbors, and I'll let you apply the specifics. Does that make sense? So, general principles. In the different levels of relationship you have, it is good to be willing to be open about moving the relationship deeper, but to hold it with an open hand, knowing that maybe they aren't interested in going deeper, or maybe life situations will keep that from happening. It's good to have relationships where you can talk about the weather and the plans for next week. But you also need relationships where you can talk about the hard stuff and ask people to pray for you for what you really need. All right. Maybe also in your handouts, check out the jar with the rocks inside. You've probably heard of this illustration. Picture your relational time and energy as a jar, and you can only reach around so much. You only have so much time and energy to invest in people and relationships. And we all prioritize in some way who gets our time and energy. I think periodically it's good for us to think hard about who do we want to prioritize. So this is an exercise for later. Maybe come back to this jar picture and write on some of the big relationships in your life that you want to be prioritizing, that you want to be sure not to miss. If you fill up your relational jar with small or insignificant or lesser relationships, you won't have time for the more important ones. Have you all ever been around someone who give the vibes of, you're not welcome here, stay away, keep your distance? So I'd like us to think about walls and bridges. In relationships, we can invite people in, or we can try to keep them out by what we say, by how we act, by just the way we relate. And I feel like this is something that we're all growing in. It's not that you either do it one way or the other. I think it's a process that we're all trying to grow in. On the other hand, picture with me a bridge in a picturesque setting that seems to say, welcome, come close, you're invited, let's talk, what's going on for you? Learning to be vulnerable and open with others invites people in. I'll read a quote from Angela Yoder. I think she might have gotten it from someone else, but she said, God wants to use your weaknesses, not just your strengths. If all people see are your strengths, they may get discouraged and think, well, good for her, but I'll never be able to do that. But when they see God using you and working in you in spite of your weaknesses, it might encourage them to think, well, maybe God can use me. Our strengths can create competition, but our weaknesses can create community. We are naturally drawn to humble people. Authenticity attracts, and vulnerability is the pathway to intimacy. That sounds like a bridge to me. All right, the how of relationships. So I have 5 C's that I'd like to give to y'all for how we can foster fellowship. Number 1, grow in Christ-like character. And again, this is not everything there is to know about this, but I have 3 ways to grow in Christ-like character: love, forgive, and be humble. And we'll talk about them a little bit. How many of you have nieces and nephews? Okay. How many of you have nieces and nephews under 5? Wow. So in my experience, little people, especially at that age, like to mimic. They like to repeat words and actions and try to be like people that they admire. I think maybe that's what Paul is after in Ephesians 4, where he says, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. Therefore be imitators of God as dear children, and walk in love, as Christ also has loved us and given himself for us." So in telling you to have Christ-like character, I'm not saying just muster this up and get it done. I'm saying be motivated by wanting to mimic our Father. Love people, not for what you will get. Forgive, choose to let it go, choose to not be offended. We didn't deserve forgiveness either. And be humble. Philippians 2:3-8 say, and this is reading from the New Living Translation, "Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourself. Don't think only about your own affairs, but be interested in others too, and what they are doing. Your attitude should be the same that Jesus Christ had. Though he was God, he did not demand or cling to his rights as God. He made himself nothing. He took the humble position of a slave and appeared in human form. And in that human form, he obediently humbled himself to the criminal's death on a cross." So in your relationships, be humble, be unselfish, take an interest in others, have the attitude that you could be wrong. Be quick to confess your sin and your weakness, and recognize your need for others to give you grace. Number 2, show care. And I will invite you to the book of Job for this one. Job chapter 2. I found it interesting that when I was asking for examples of friendship from the Bible, nobody said Job and his friends. I would like to say that I think Job and his friends are a beautiful case study of friendship. Job chapter 2, and we will read 11-13, reading from the New King James. "Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they raised their eyes from afar, they did not recognize him. They lifted their voices and wept, and each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head towards heaven. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great." That sounds like some pretty amazing friends to me. I won't talk right now about the next 39 chapters, but at least that sounds like a pretty good friend. So, show care. And I have 3 points that I'd like to make on this one as well. Showing care can be done through taking time, showing up, and encouraging. It takes time to listen, to be quiet, and just sit with someone in silence. It takes time to put yourself in their world, to do those acts of service, to make that phone call or go visit. When was the last time that you were generous with your time? Show up. So we don't know exactly where Job's friends were from. Likely they walked or came by donkey. Likely these were wealthy men who were taking time out of a busy schedule. They came and sat with Job for 7 days and 7 nights. They came in person. They didn't send a text or a message by Pony Express. They came and sat face to face with Job. I realize you can't always do that, but when possible, try to show up. Go to the funeral, go to the wedding, go to the birthday party, when you can be present face to face. I think for us single women, one way that we appreciate people showing up is through physical touch. Giving somebody a hug or a touch on the shoulder or just some kind of affectionate, thoughtful gesture can be one way to show up that does not come through in a card or a phone call. And maybe one other way to show up, smile. You can hear smiles over the phone, I know, but there's nothing quite like seeing someone smile. And I'm seeing a lot of that right now. Number 3, encourage. So we will not take time to read this, but I would refer you to Acts, to the 4th chapter and the 9th chapter, where Barnabas is described as the son of encouragement. He's also a good character study on friendship. Barnabas took Paul in and introduced him to the apostles and vouched for him. He encouraged Paul at a vulnerable time in his life. So some ways to encourage people around us might be to pray with them or for them. I'll tell you a story about this one. When my dad had a stroke a couple years ago, we spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. And I remember a Sunday afternoon, I was either coming or going, and things had been pretty rough. And I was riding the elevator, and another couple stepped in, and we got to chatting like you do in a hospital. And the lady asked what we were there for, and I told her, and she said, "Well, are you a believer? Can I pray for you?" And so we stepped off of the elevator, and there in the comings and goings of the hospital, she prayed for me. And it was an encouragement. So pray with and for people. Learn to weep with those that weep and to rejoice with those that rejoice. Want their best. It doesn't mean that you always need to fix the things that they're telling you or the hard things they're experiencing. Sometimes it's enough just to be there. And I would encourage us to not just think about ways to care for those around us, but to act. It's pretty easy to have good ideas and write down brainstorms you have, but remember when you can to actually act or live out this care. Number 3, be committed. So I'll give you two examples for this one. Ruth and Naomi and Jonathan and David are both excellent examples of being committed in relationships. Maybe another way of saying this would be stick to it and expect ups and downs in relationships. Sticking to it means you will persevere, you will be regular in reaching out to the people around you, that you're willing to walk with them through difficulty, and when things get rough or life gets busy, stick to it. Now, having said that, I realize that most relationships are for a season, where you're not going to be best friends with somebody from the age of 5 until the age of 95. Like, that's rare nowadays. But I think in a general way, we tend to not stick to it. When something gets hard or life gets busy, we easily bow out. And I think we do well to push in and to persevere, to be committed. And expect ups and downs. What we focus on matters. In relationships, especially when things feel hard, think about, are you focusing on the negative or on the good? I'm sure there's both there, but what we focus on tends to grow. Number 4, cultivate healthy communication. Y'all, this is a big one. So I would like to read 2 scriptures about this, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. I would like to just bow out and let somebody else talk about this, because I feel like I'm so learning in this area. But here's what the Bible says. Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. And Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. So how are you using your communication? Is it bringing life or death? Is it building people up or tearing people down? Is it giving grace or discouragement? Proverbs 31, where the virtuous woman is described, says that the woman of wisdom opens her mouth with wisdom, and the law of kindness is on her tongue. That is a high standard for us to reach for. So 3 ideas or ways that you can cultivate healthy communication would be work on openness, work on speaking truth in love, and work on speaking edifying things. Openness. I think this has the idea of honesty and authenticity. I'll tell you a story that I'm not proud of. I was working for a man who was very busy with church and in the community, and he was just always on the move. And as one of the supervisors under him, I often filled in for him. Like, he was busy, so I filled in for him. And it came to the point of me being frustrated with him and feeling kind of used and burned out for always covering. And one day we sat down to talk about it, and he said, you know, Valerie, just tell me. If you're feeling overwhelmed or if I'm gone too much, just tell me. I'm not going to pick up on this automatically. Like, maybe I should, but I don't. Just be open with me and tell me. Put it into words. Say it out loud. Tell me. And I was thinking how maybe especially in our relationships with men, This is important. I think we as ladies tend to read vibes or pick up on cues in ways that men may or may not. So especially with men, but in general, don't expect people to know or to ask just the right questions to draw you out. Be willing to be open, to just say what's on your heart or what's going on. Not in a way that throws yourself at their feet, but in a mature way. Be open. Speaking truth in love. I think we do well to think about what is our purpose or motive for saying the things that we do. To ask ourselves, is this helpful to say? Is it kind? Is it worthwhile? Maybe another story. I was in a train-in once upon a time where I kind of botched things up. And in retrospect with my supervisor, he said to me, you should have asked for help instead of just going on and making the mess deeper and wider and more messy. Just ask for help. And that kind of stung, but in retrospect, it actually felt really good that he cared enough to speak truth. It was motivated by love. So be willing to be that person that speaks truth in love. Or when people do that for you, hear it. Recognize that it's coming from a heart of love. And speak edifying words. Ecclesiastes says there's a time to speak and a time to be quiet. And I don't know all of the time how that's supposed to work. But work on that. Learn to sense when is a timely way of saying something and when is it time to just be quiet. Learn to be thankful, to speak encouragement, to sprinkle healthy humor into your conversations. I think edification might mean sometimes being okay with having casual conversations, learning to talk about the wind and the weather, learning to keep a conversation going, but also to be able to take things to a deeper level sometimes and speak truth and grace to the folks you're interacting with. Maybe in a big way, try to evaluate yourself or ask others to evaluate you. Is your communication building walls or bridges in your relationships? Is it keeping people out or inviting them in? Number 5, work on conflict resolution. So this is from Matthew 7. Well, maybe before we go there, I think that this one is a hard one for us as single women. We can easily fly under the radar with this one, where because we are solo, we don't have to figure things out. If we're in a hard relationship or we're disagreeing with somebody or have a bad attitude, we can pretty easily just go to our house and do our own thing or pull away from the relationship. We maybe pretty easily avoid resolving conflict. But in order to foster fellowship and to be in relationships that please God, I think this is a skill that's necessary for us to grow in. Again, it's not so much that you have it or you don't. I think it's something that we're all growing in. From Matthew 7, we'll read verses 3 to 5. It says, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Here, let me remove the speck from your eye,' and look, a plank is in your own? Hypocrite, first remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." So when you find yourself in conflict, I would encourage us to think about, what is your responsibility? Not so much what are they doing wrong or how should they be changing, but look at yourself. Look in the mirror first. What is your responsibility? And here are some ways that we are responsible. We can pray. Pray for the person, pray about the conflict, pray for yourself in the middle of the conflict. That is yours to do. Also, learn when and how to keep your mouth shut, or to guard it carefully, at least. In thinking about what is going on in us, or what are we bringing to the conflict, James 4 says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire and do not have, so you kill. You covet it, but you cannot obtain. So you quarrel and fight." So it seems like, at least from this passage, James is saying, when you're in conflict, think about what's going on in you. What are you wanting? What are you desiring that's driving this? And maybe it's not much of anything, or maybe it is something that needs some addressing. Sometimes in conflict, we are more interested in using or fearing people than in loving them. So in conflict, 3 things to remember. Think about what is your responsibility. Seek for reconciliation. And steward conflict. Let me explain. In the book Peacemaker, which was one of the recommended reads up here, the author talks about how there's maybe a spectrum of how to relate to conflict. On one end, you have people or ways of kind of escaping or denying or trying to get away from the conflict. On the other hand, you have ways of attacking or getting angry or kind of despising the person you're in conflict with. So fighting or flight, fight or flight. But somewhere in the middle, it seems like there is a way to honestly face and try to reconcile, to try to understand what's going on for them, what's going on for you, and how can you glorify God in the middle of this. Y'all, there are mature ways to talk about hard things. Maybe it's not so much who is right, but more what is right. When in conflict, seek to glorify God. Seek to serve the other person. Seek to grow to be like Christ, in spite of and maybe because of this conflict. Reconciliation is not always possible, but often it is. As you look at yourself and take responsibility for what's going on there, as you seek to draw near to the other person, often there is a way forward. But when it feels like there isn't, maybe ask for input from the people around you. And there might be times when you just agree to disagree, and you love them in spite of it. But I suspect that often there's a way to reconcile if we take God's way. All right, number 3, steward conflict. So this one is kind of a change of perspective. I think conflict can be an opportunity to understand ourselves and the other person better. Instead of just butting heads, maybe if we see it as a way to get to know what do they like or what's going on for them, it can actually teach us about how to love them better. Or it can teach us things about ourselves. Are there things that are too important to us or that we tend to struggle with that we should work on? And in stewarding conflict, it is a way to glorify God in our own lives, in the lives of our churches, and in our communities when we seek to please Him and love others when it's not natural, when it would be easier to withdraw or to just keep up the feud. Steward conflict by seeking to glorify God in the middle of it. So, what kind of a friend are you? A man that has friends must show himself friendly. I would invite you all to grade yourself, or to have somebody that knows you well grade yourself. How well are you doing with Christ-like character, with caring, with being committed, with healthy communication, with working on conflict resolution in the relationships that are around you? Again, it's not so much that you are or you aren't, it's are you growing? And the last section, barriers of fellowship. So I have this divided into 3 different ideas. One is barriers that come from our hearts. Another is cultural pressures that I think we fight against. And then maybe barriers that are especially strong for single women. So from our hearts, I think fear is a big barrier to fellowship. We talked about this already this weekend, different fears that we have. Relationships involve risk. It means opening our hearts and being vulnerable. We tend to try to protect ourselves from hurt and disappointment, from criticism or shame of failure, or just trying to hide who we really are. Pride is a barrier of fellowship. So it can be good to evaluate yourself, not all the time, but periodically, and think about in a conversation, what percentage of the things that you talk about are about you, and what percentage are about the other person? Is it all about me? Is it mostly about me and what I think and what I want and what I did? Or are you having a blend of talking about them and talking about you? I think most relationships should include some of both knowing others and letting ourselves be known. But we do well to think about what are our conversations about? Who are our conversations about? And with this one, I would say, just remember that pride is the default setting for all of us. It's what's normal. So we should all be fighting against pride in our conversations and in our relationships. It's not so much that you have it or you don't, it's are you growing in this? And idolatry is a barrier of fellowship. I think this is a sticking place for women. We are created to be relational. We like connection. That is a good thing. That's how we were designed. But we can pretty quickly slide into thinking that relationships are ultimate. Like if we just had that closeness, then we'd be satisfied. Or is that not how y'all find it? So relationships can be beautiful, but they will not satisfy ultimately. They will not give you ultimate purpose and identity. Maybe some questions to think about to gauge, are your relationships tending towards idolatry, or are they in a healthy place? Think about, do you need your friends' validation to feel good about yourself? Do you take more from friendships than what you give? Do you place unrealistic expectations on your friends? Do you expect them to always be at your beck and call, to always understand you perfectly, to always be there to listen for you when you want to spill? Do you obsess over the possibility of losing a friendship? Do you find an unhealthy amount of security in this relationship? If this relationship doesn't go the way you want or is taken away, can you still live in a godly and fruitful way? Subtly misplacing our worship and redirecting it towards relationship instead of towards God means that we are worshiping the gift instead of the giver. When we place too much weight on a human being, we're actually asking them to carry something that only Jesus can bear. Earthly friendship is wonderful and beautiful and a vulnerable thing, but it is foolish to try to find our ultimate satisfaction and nourishment there. It will end up crushing our relationships. We are created to find these things, this satisfaction and nourishment in God, and to live out of the overflow of that relationship. Number 2, cultural pressures. So I'm told that the average American has 200 Facebook friends or more. I don't know how that strikes you, but I think that maybe those kinds of friends are pretty far from what Proverbs describes as a good friend. I've heard it said that if you have 2 or 3 really good, close friends in your lifetime, those soul-to-soul, spill-the-beans kinds of friends, you are blessed beyond the average person. Proverbs says, "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." I'm not saying it's wrong to have Facebook friends or to have many acquaintances in your world. Those things can add richness to your life. But don't be tricked by quantity over quality. Social media can give us the idea that we are in the know, or that we are somewhat connected or staying current on other people's lives. And there can be a place for staying in touch with out-of-town people in those ways. But beware of those distracting you from being in relationship with the people who are right around you. And over busyness. We as single women have a lot going. We work a full-time job, we keep house, we do food prep and grocery shopping, and often are involved with church stuff. Like, we have a lot going. Plus, we live in American culture and American Anabaptist culture, which also has a lot going. And that's maybe not all bad, But sometimes I think the busyness of life crowds out or fills up our jar and squeezes out room for authentic and deep relationships. I find that when I'm saying things like, I'm busy, I don't have time, I have so much to do, it's probably time to evaluate, what am I putting in my jar? Do I really have my priorities straight? And it might not be that I don't, but it's just a good time to check when life feels full that you're putting the most important things in first. Don't let busyness squeeze out time for relationships. Take time to make that phone call, to deliver the flowers or the casserole, to pray with somebody in the hospital elevator, to smile at that cashier and genuinely ask, how was your day? And the last section, barriers, especially for single women. I don't know if y'all will agree with these or not. Maybe these are reflections of what I have found to be barriers. Being spread thin. Like we were just saying, we live busy lives, we have a lot going. I think, let me think how to say this. I think that in the busyness and many responsibilities, we need to prioritize or find a way to keep relationships important, but also to acknowledge our limits. And I'm not always sure how that looks. We often miss out on church sewings or the ladies' Bible study or the birthday party because we're at work or we're busy doing the things we need to do. And I would say don't feel guilty about that necessarily, but be sensitive about evaluating where are your priorities and are you being faithful in the whole of life, not just in particular areas. The second one, we often need to initiate. So I have had people, dear, well-meaning people, who say things like, well, if you're ever lonely, just come on over. Just give me a call. Just let me know. Which is great, but it can, on a bad day, sound like, oh, they don't need me. I guess I need them more than they need me. And their lives are full, but they'll squeeze a little spot in if I need it. On a bad day, it might sound that way. And fostering fellowship might mean taking them up on their offer and dropping in on that Sunday night, or calling them, or saying, you know, I'm discouraged. Can we talk? Would you have time to pray with me? Like, be willing to initiate, even if it feels scary or like you're needy. But do it in a mature way. Initiating might mean not waiting for them to ask just the right questions and then you'll talk. Not waiting for them to notice that you're lonely or struggling, but being willing to move towards them. Take the initiative. Doing so can feel really vulnerable and highlight this feeling of being unseen or like we don't belong. But I would suggest that as we take responsibility to do this, it will be a bridge. It will foster fellowship. And the last one, sometimes a barrier of fellowship is that we mind the gap. We are at different stages than our married friends. We don't have children. We don't have husbands. Our lives are very different from many of the other people around us, the sisters in our church or friends in the community. And jealousy and comparison, or feeling like we just don't fit, can be a barrier to fellowship. One of my married friends and I were talking about this, and she said, when she is in a crowd of people, if she sees a circle of single ladies talking, she is intimidated to go up and say, "Can I join your conversation?" She just doesn't feel like she fits. I think we know what it's like from the other side, where if there's a group of married ladies or young moms talking, we might not be intimidated, but we might wonder, should I go talk to them? Sometimes we mind the gap, and that can be a barrier of fellowship. I would say it is good for us to learn to see people as people, to see what do we have in common, to be willing to cross the bridge into their world, to move towards them. In your handouts, I included 50 conversation questions. We won't read over them now, but those are for you to look at or use in the future as ways to move towards people and to foster fellowship. In conclusion, I would invite you to turn to 1 Corinthians 13 for just a couple of verses. 1 Corinthians 13. And we will read verses 4 through 7. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. So as we think about fostering fellowship and the ideas that I put out there with you, I want to remind us yet that change usually does not happen quickly. Be okay with learning to grow your fellowship being a process, being something that you work on in a continual way. You won't always get it right, but seek to grow. If you want a 2-sentence summary of what I just said in the last 45 minutes, it would be this. Move towards people. And if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you.